Hello. There is a long list of individuals I would love to interview about their incredible contributions to the history of Warhammer, 40k, and Games Workshop. Fortunately, I've been able to interview several of those people already, but there are some whose contributions are so enormous it's hard to quantify the scale. And I'm speaking with one such individual today. Somebody who has changed the way the world sees Games Workshop and helped to create Warhammer and 40k from the very ground up. Spend any time reading Games Workshop rulebooks, scanning through libraries of fighting fantasy books, flicking through the pages of the legendary Tolkien bestiary, and you will no doubt be stopped in your tracks by the remarkable, inimitable, irreplaceable art of Games Workshop's former art director. And he's far from finished making art yet. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I have the great privilege to be in conversation with John Blanche. John, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I like to start these conversations just by exploring a little bit about your background and how you came to be involved in the hobby and the work that you were doing. So I wondered if you might start by telling us a bit about how you became an artist. How did that begin?
How did you become an artist? I just was. I distinctly remember preschool age, so I'd be 3 or 4, and I saw myself standing at an easel with a white smock and a berry on my head.
Right.
Because that's what artists look like, isn't it?
Sure.
So, and yeah, I'd never been anything else. So I didn't become an artist. I just was an artist.
Right.
Or a scribbler.
Right.
I think artist is probably too grandiose for me. I'm an illustrator, and I've got 2 distinct styles. You know, I've got a very, very fast sketchy style, which I do concept sketches, and then I've got a much slower, more considered style, like the Black Templar's box cover, which was 3 months' work there. You know, that's a long time.
Yeah.
But I've worked from home for the last. Well, I'm retired now, but I certainly worked from home for the last 30 odd years. So, you know, sort of in my own environment with my own things, just plodding away as you do.
Right. So when you were quite young then, so you were always just illustrating, drawing, scribbling, as you say. How did it turn into something you were doing professionally?
Well, I went to art school in the 60s, which was it was a kind of disaster because they were all into jazz music and existentialism, and I wanted to draw pictures, and they wouldn't let me because, you know, you got to think of ideas, and so I moved on and did a graphics course, and I was allowed to hone my illustrative skills through that course, and that was when I first discovered Tolkien book as well. So it'll be about 68 time. I was doing pretend Roman military manuals and all sorts of weird stuff, just so I could do illustrations. And then one of the lecturers at art school said, "Here, read this, you'll like it." And it was a copy of The Hobbit. I went on to Lord of the Rings. I think within a week I'd finished all. It was like 4 books then, and the one big thing it did was give me permission to do fantasy things. I always felt slightly bad about drawing fantasy subject matter because it was dived on by lecturers at art school. They thought it wasn't real, and you'd never get work at this, would you, John? So I became a freelance illustrator doing book covers, and then the Tolkien bestiary work came along, and I first met Ian Miller and Roger Dean, and things just took off from that point. I was doing freelance for Roger Dean, did a book with him called The Prince and the Woodcutter. And I knew Brian Ansell, I'd known him for years, and he
Right.
he was running Asgard Miniatures at the time. But miniatures, you see. Anything to do with miniatures was always there. And Ian and Steve had opened the Dalling Road shop for Games Workshop, and I just got on the train with my portfolio and went down there and see them and said hello. Have a look at it. So they give me early White Dwarf work, and then Brian Ansell took me on 3 days a week because we were sort of late 70s, early 80s. It was pretty much it was another recession. It was a terrible time for people. And I was doing work for people, and I wouldn't get paid. It was terrible. So Brian gave me a steady income for 3 days a week. And that's when I started doing concepts for Chaos Warriors and Orcs and just loads of stuff. Jez will remember. I can't remember. I'm too old. Some of it's in Hero for War Games, some of these sheets. I used to do Brian these sheets of concepts, and he'd pay me in cash. And 1980 came round. I just said, that gives a job. He said, yeah, you don't want a job, do you, Blanche? And I said I do, because I'm fed up of stamps and holidays and working Sundays and all the rest of the rigmarole of being freelance. So give me a full-time job, 1980. And it turned into a 40-year-old career, really. So,
yeah.
That's how I became an artist.
Right. Because those, I mean, the in the Heroes for War Games, yeah, it's got your pages of sketches, and there's just like countless ideas of different variations, iterations on those, and the Chaos Warrior and different armors and looks. Was that all just like what was influencing that kind of stuff? Was that just from your mind, or were you drawing on inspiration?
I don't know. I've never read Moorcock in my life, so I know nothing about all that stuff, but everybody else seems to feed off it, but I don't know it. I read a few Conan books, but no, real history, real life history. That's what inspires my work. So I'll just give it a bit of a nudge into a fantasy realm from that point. And if you're basing your work on real arms and armor, it gives it a credibility you don't get just by making it up. Everybody can draw flowing robes and a sword with lots of points coming out of it, but it's got to look real. So it gives it gravitas, gives it a good. The thing is, I always saw everything in terms of model soldiers, not in terms of art. And I notice a lot of people, they'll do what they call concepts, is they'll just copy an image and say, this is a concept of a space marine. I go, that's me, just copied a miniature. And they don't understand what the word concept means. It's something that conveys ideas, but building on a base with a historical context. It's it's really important to me. I see the work of lots of work by young men, and they seem to base everything on video games. And I go, well, the best video games, where did they get it all from? And they go, oh, yeah, I never thought of that. I go, yeah, there you go. Anyway, just had a pot of history in my life, haven't you?
Sure. Well, I mean, so in those early days, I mean, obviously you were working with Games Workshop, and you mentioned Steve Jackson, Ian Livingstone. They went on to create Fighting Fantasy, and then Steve Jackson did Sorcery as well, which you did a lot of art for. I mean, what was that sort of journey like? What was it like working with those guys on those kind of projects?
Well, we were friends by then, and I particularly got on well with Steve. I used to go to stay with them in their flat in London, and we'd chew the fat and share dinners and things. And it just sort of grew out of that process, really. But the pay was abysmal. It was awful. I worked really hard for very little money.
Mm.
But at the time, Brian was keeping me alive. So,
Sure.
and joining, having a full-time job, it's like a sigh of relief. It's like, I can have a Sunday afternoon. I can go on holiday. Hooray!
Yeah.
But we never saw or had any inkling what Games Workshop would become. I mean, to start with, the embryonic studio was Rick on his electric typewriter generating spaces in Warhammer, which either Tony or I would fill with an illustration. 3 of us in one house next to the canal in Newark. It was very, very. We had an open fire. I was going to say it's very cosy. And I remember beef burgers and open fires, and it was lovely. And and Warhammer came out of that era, and sure, Rick worked really hard, and yeah, it was a kind of dream job, really, because you're well away from everybody else. Just exist in your little bubble.
Yeah. So you were literally, like, Rick was writing pages and creating, like you say, space, literal space on pages for you to then.
Yes.
Would you just come up with any idea? It would just be whatever you fancied, or was it sort of drawing on something?
Well, I'll tell you what, I always had miniatures in my head at the time.
Right.
Particularly the work of the Perry twins, because they'd be using a lot of my concept sheets and working those up into models, and try to extend that process into the illustrations in Warhammer. I was doing the cover for it. It's the start of Harry the Hammer. But they were great days, you know. I was a young man, and beef burgers, miners' strikes. It was great.
I mean, I was curious actually just about the sort of style that you have developed over time, because it is very idiosyncratic. I mean, a John Blanche piece looks like a John Blanche piece, and I was curious if there were any influences that you have seen across the art world that you feel like you've learned from, or sort of taken pointers from as you've developed.
Well, my style is very distinctive in the sketchy form, and but all my pen work is directly inspired by turn of the century illustrators, people like Arthur Rackham and Aubrey Beardsley. God, he died young, and his lines are perfect. And Kay Nielsen and Edmund Dulac, but these guys drew, and because the printing process at the time wasn't as sophisticated as what it is nowadays, the use of colour was always very limited palette and almost washed out. I mean, look at Arthur Rackham's work, and it's all got that kind of sepia, and I thought, I tried to draw like that. But his work is it's part of the process of printing. But I was trying to copy what I could see in prints. But that's what inspired me.
Yeah.
And then I met Ian Miller about 79, and Ian's work just blew me away. Still does. So we're talking about doing a Rat Spike 2.
Right.
Me and Ilan, with James Sheriff doing all the graphics, sticking it on a Kickstarter. And that was an eye-opener. Putting 4 miniatures on a Kickstarter.
Right.
I thought, who's going to be interested in these? And James Sheriff sculpted them. They're very nice. And we put them on Kickstarter just for a week. I thought maybe make a couple of grand, perhaps. So last time I looked, it was about £120,000.
Because this is quite recent, isn't it? This is the sort of current project.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Completely took me by surprise, which is a lot more money than anybody's supposed to earn
Hmm.
without that registered. So I've got to make myself a little company now.
Right.
Yeah,
Sure.
Blanche Limited and all that crap.
Right. Because you think there's that sort of thing is the kind of project you would do again, like these kind of small runs of designed miniatures, that kind of thing?
I'd love to. I really would. I'm very much in love with the work of James Sheriff, and his time is so limited. And he's doing stuff for Trench Crusade and other things. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
But I'm doing 54s with some other people.
Right.
Won't be Inquisitor, but it will be 54 mil figures.
Wow. Great.
So, and see where that goes.
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated about this because you've mentioned a couple of times just about how you think or you're sort of designing towards the miniature, I guess. So
Yeah.
you're sort of keeping in mind what this is going to look like on the table. So when you're doing concept art, it's like, how are we going to physically make this? That's the sort of mindset.
Sort of. I tend to draw things very flat, with
Right.
no sort of exaggerated movements, because I like to draw the costume and the weapons, and we let the actual sculptor sort out the anatomy and the position and stuff. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But
Right.
I don't want to prescribe to another creative person. That would be awful. I'll give them a sheet of paper and say, here, make that, and don't do anything different.
Hmm.
That's awful. I won't like people doing that to me. I'll try not to do it to other people. What I like to do is show them a drawing and say something like this. Allow this to be like the standard leading you into battle. Go with it. Go with the flow.
Right.
So,
I mean, are there any miniatures then, thinking back over, because obviously you've designed or done concepts for so many miniatures at GW over the years. Are
yeah.
there any that really stood out as like you felt like they really captured what you were trying to get at with your concepts, with the art that you developed?
The what are the Gouda ghosts called?
The Age of Sigmar ones of more recently.
Yeah,
The Night Haunt, would it be?
Nightborn. Yeah, all that
Right.
range. Yeah, I did pages and pages of that stuff, all floating, flying in one direction, and rather dangerous looking, rather than just plain spooky bit of cloth. But
Yeah.
mad wraiths and lots of movement. I love that range. Yeah, the one I missed doing because I retired was Skaven, of course. But I'd
Right.
love to work on that. I've done plenty over the years anyway. So,
Yeah.
yeah, Chaos Beastmen for
Right.
AOS. Yeah, it's hard to remember everything. It's hard to remember what who's done what. There's only me and Jez doing it for 40 years.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, Games Workshop has a concept team. I think there's 10 or 11 people working in that team now. But it's so much work going through. It's unbelievable.
Hmm.
Yeah, particularly with the film stuff and everything.
Sure.
Not that I know a lot about it, because I don't.
Sure.
So don't ask me. I don't know.
Well, I mean, what was it like in those early days when it was just you and Jez and a smaller team sort of working on brand new games? Warhammer was kind of just getting started. 40K didn't really exist yet. Was there a different vibe back then?
I suppose there was, but personally, I didn't feel it, because it was always a question of really exciting, isn't it? And that goes for later editions as well.
Mm.
But those first editions, there was always the next one. Brian was a powerhouse of original thinking, and there's there's another game. Oh, there's another game. Oh, there's another game. It's no time to sit still and think, "Wow, that was good." No, none of that business.
Sure. Yeah.
So no, I felt very lucky, and it was good to be away from the freelance world, and it was very good to be in a world of miniatures and games, and not as if I ever played. I never
Sure.
did. I was too busy drawing all the time. But since I'm retired, I've started playing games in my way, which means other people know the rules and I don't.
Sure.
Throw a dice, John. Oh, okay.
That's interesting. So you weren't really sort of playing the games, but you were collecting miniatures and painting miniatures and doing a lot of stuff with actual like the models themselves, though, weren't you?
Yes, absolutely. I always liked the newest ones that came out. Oh, I've got to paint them. Oh, there's some new ones. Oh, I've got to paint them. Oh. And as such, never settled down into anything. So I was always on this hungry march through miniatures. Because, before I started art school, there was no such thing as fantasy miniatures. Didn't exist.
Hmm.
So, I remember FX articles on converting stuff. And I remember getting sets of Union cavalry and converting them into Huns with plasticine.
Right.
I had a suitcase with about 300 Huns on horses in. Never did anything with them. Yeah, there's no such thing as fantasy. I mean, the first fantasy figures came out and just absolutely blew my mind. But really minifigs doing Lord of the Rings and Valley of the Four Winds and Greenwood and Boar through Garrison started to make some. And because I'd met God, my memory. Tell you, when you get over 70, you just forget everything. I used to go to the Society of Ancients meetings in London, and I met the Greenwood and Boar chaps. I started to do loads of concepts for them, all based on Kay Nielsen and Conan and stuff, because that's all I know. So a lot of their fantasy ranges are still around, aren't they? They're still around by another company. I can't remember its name. But yeah, they're still there. And yeah, you used to meet all sorts of people. As me with my hair was longer than yours. It's sit at this place in London, usually at Caxton Hall, and one of the organisers always used to come and talk to me. After a few years, I said to him, "What do you do for a living?" He says, "Oh, I'm in special branch." That was fun.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious actually about, you mentioned when you were going to art school and everyone was listening to jazz and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There feels like there's been a real relationship between Games Workshop, certainly the early sort of Citadel years, and rock music. And there's like that overlapping fandom. I mean, did you experience that? Is that something you've seen?
Well, the dichotomy was at art school, the people playing jazz were middle class.
Right.
And you get into miniatures and games, and there's a much more working class core to it. And it was a bit later anyway, the early 70s instead of the late 60s. And yeah, people like rock music. And of course, I went off on another tangent then by myself, left all the rockers to their head nodding music, and I was listening to electronic soundtracks by the likes of Brian Eno and Cluster and gaggle of Germanic bands.
Sure.
But, that's the way life is.
Yeah.
I like mixing stuff, So I'd be riding a custom Harley Davidson and going to antiques fairs.
Right.
People go, "What?" No, we'll listen to Meatloaf and have a beer with us. No. It's horrible.
Sure. I mean, you at Games Workshop as art director, you ended up recruiting quite a lot of really talented artists to come in and work on the various properties that GW was developing.
Yes,
Like, what was your like process and thinking there in getting all of that talent together? How did you find people?
they came to us.
Right.
And we had done a kind of a pretend apprenticeship scheme going on, and would take 3 people a year, and people like Alex Boyd and Paul Dainton, they were always, they tried that a number of times, but they got there in the end, didn't they? And Adrian Smith popped up one day. He was 19, straight out of art school. I thought, give him a job straight away.
Right.
Steve Tappin, he did work experience for me, give a week's work while he was still at school. And then he came to work for us. Brilliant. And then he left and became an art director for Industrial Light and Magic. You go, yay! Yeah. Some truly, truly brilliant, awesome artists.
Yeah.
And they all made me better as an artist. You know, I won't put myself amongst their ranks, but they made my drawing better because of it. And I'll be truly grateful for that process. Well, that just happened by accident. It wasn't deemed deemed to be an actual process. It's just something that happened on the side.
Right.
It was good, and it's when you look back at it, you think, "Blimey, that was great," but we
Yeah.
didn't at the time. You know, just more drawings, more projects you can shake a stick at.
Yeah. Because it was just constant. It seems like there was just this.
Yeah.
It was an engine of innovation for a long time. It seems like there was just a new project every week from the looks of things.
Yeah. Well, certainly every month. Yeah.
Right.
And it was hard work at first, you know, trying to meld everybody into having a shared vision. You know, the vision that was, you know, we knew what the vision was, and getting people to get on board with us was quite difficult. No, it'd take more time, you know.
Hmm.
And that was the first project. I said, look, everybody, I just want to lead this completely. And just leave me alone for 6 weeks, and we'll just illustrate it. And me and Alex Boyd went off, and that's what we did. And then at the end of 6 weeks, there was loads to do. So everybody joined in then, and it was turned out great. It's a jolly good project, that one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very fondly remembered is Mordheim, and I think around that time you were working quite closely with Thomas Pirinin,
Yeah.
6th edition of Warhammer as well. I mean, do those, because they've been described by me and others as being quite a good example of sort of your vision of the Warhammer world. Is that fair, do you think, to sort of say that? Is that how you saw Warhammer through those sort of projects?
I always saw Warhammer, and I've mentioned in terms of history, in the late 1400s in Europe, they were coming up to the year 1500. They really thought it would be the second coming of Christ, and everything would be destroyed. There'd be Armageddon. And so I grafted that into the Warhammer world, really. So the Warhammer world became, I pretend, Europe, the high Renaissance, and there was always doom and gloom in the corner of everybody's eye. Beastmen, Skaven, comets, Warpstone. So yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, because there's also that the Blood on the Reich, the art book that kind of explores that feel, that tone of the sort of the portents and the oppressive kind of feeling of living in the Empire, right? It's definitely got that.
Yeah, there was going to be if I remember rightly, anyway, it's going to be a computer game, and Dave Gallagher did all those concepts, taking what we were doing over to the computer game, and then the computer game never happened. So he came back, and BL published all that work, and
Right.
very, very fine it is too. Inspirational almost. Well, not almost, it is inspirational.
Indeed, it is, yeah. Yeah. I mean, another project that I've heard was a passion project for you was the Dreadfleet game, the naval war game.
Yeah, well, it was in a sense. Oh, we got
Right.
that so horribly wrong, though. It
Right,
talked,
okay.
it talked to be miniatures and not ships. It talked to be boarding parties and pirates and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, it was called 28 mil at the time. It never was, though. Can't even call them 32 mils, can I? Because they're not. But yeah, actual miniatures. It's been fabulous. However, you know the portraits in the Dreadfleet book that I did. I drew all that stuff as concepts. You know, never as illustrations for the actual book. It was just done as concepts to help the process. And then I visualised the box cover, and I did a scribble on a trace. And Alex Boyd painted that, and I go, it's tremendous. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, who doesn't like galleons with ripped sails and mad pirates and stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And it is dripping with that feel, that vibe. It's interesting to hear though that there might have been so it would have been almost a 28 mil or whatever the scale might have been boarding parties game.
It should have been,
right,
because it feeds into the other ranges, and the other ranges would feed or would have fed into that.
Right.
You know, it could be Captain Dread.
Yeah. I mean, was that ever discussed then, or is that just in retrospect? That's how we should have done it.
In retrospect,
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the directors just loved little model boats, and we all just got carried along on his enthusiasm, I have to admit.
Right.
Yeah. We should have held sway.
I mean, you mentioned before the third edition box cover for 40k and the Black Templars. Obviously, you did the second edition as well, the Blood Angels. I mean, 40k as a sort of, it's a beast. It became this overriding massive success. I mean, what was it like seeing that happen and being part of that?
Different times created different markets. Now, the first one, Rogue Trader, I spent most of my time commissioning art rather than doing it, which was a great mistake. I should have drawn pictures instead of getting other people to draw pictures. However, then going into that second edition, it's very brash, very bright. Main figure's got very heavy black key lines around it. And our market was really 14 and 15-year-olds, and perhaps even younger. And so that cover painting really catered for that market. But going into the Black Templars, it just swung right back around where it should be. It's for the older gamer. Not necessarily older, but, more serious about the models. And I remember I was in a discussion with Alan and Rick, and I said, right, what chapter are we going to base it on? I went, I don't like any of them. Well, what's that then, John? I went, well, Marine chapters are all black, aren't they? Every single one of them, they're black, whatever. And we've got dark green, grey, red, and the other one. And so they just left it with me and said, well, you met one up then. And there was a mention of Black Templars in the original Rogue Trader. Who doesn't like Templars anyway? All that Maltese crosses and stuff.
Sure.
So that's what I did. And now they are a thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
So retrofitted figures to match my painting. Of course, the painting that just makes stuff up. People assume that every single mark has a meaning, Everybody in the studio knew about that little mark, and that means this in the ranges. No, it doesn't. That's where I dropped my paintbrush. And I have to say, it's mainly Americans that have these view of things. You know, oh, look at that shoulder pad. Oh, it must have worked that one out before. I just made it up when I painted it. It had to be within keeping, obviously.
Hmm.
You know, like, kind of knew what I was doing. Wasn't making it out of thin air. I mean, like the 4 main chapters, or Ultramarines, that was the other one. Did all those in our lunch breaks, me and Jazz, and we had big sheets of paper and coloured crayons, and we just invented the whole thing. The Marines, all the colour schemes and everything. The 4 chapters. So I always had that in the back of my head anyway, you know, once you've worked on it, it's embedded in your brain. So it's easier to invent a chapter after that.
Right.
Well, it's not inventing, is it? It's discovering.
Sure.
Famous chapter in the great libraries on terror. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot of different techniques and sort of styles, I suppose, that you've employed over the years. I was curious about what your actual sort of technique or process would have been for doing. I mean, you take the Black Templar's image, for instance. You said it was 3 months long. I mean, what's the sort of physical process like for creating that kind of art?
Well, you start drawing the main figure.
Right.
And the painting grows out of that main figure, and you always have to leave space for logos. So I always tell myself, logo. Okay. And yeah, I just sort of draw bits on bits of paper. That doesn't work, chuck it away, do another bit. Oh yeah, that works better. And then I've got all these bits of paper, and I'll stick them onto the artboard with a bit of tape, and that's like I trace through.
It sounds like quite a physical process then as well. Like you're literally, you know, the medium that you're using, the paper, you're building up a sort of physical piece as well as you're doing. Have you explored digital tools and that kind of more modern sort of approaches and technologies?
No, because you'd have to develop your skills in doing that. So you'd have to start from the beginning and spend, you know, 10,000 hours working up your skills. And I just want to be a traditional illustrator.
Yeah.
I'm not bothered about digital assets. It don't have anything at the end of it. It's in the screen. Oh well, there it goes. Yeah, it has no appeal whatsoever.
Sure. I mean, do you have any views on sort of where the industry, I suppose, has it gone to, and sort of where art is today and how it's evolved and changed since you started out? I mean, what's your sort of reflections on, you know, the difference in the world of sort of creating fantasy art now?
Well, for Games Workshop in particular, because that's what I know. Some of the digital pieces are absolutely awe-inspiring. They're so panoramic. They're so beautiful, but they all look the same. I'm not getting. I don't know who's done what. You know, I find that a bit sad. You know, always wanted an art department. Everybody was an individual illustrator,
right?
Having their own individual style, which we could then feed into the product. You know, this product's got a particular feel to it, and it was who would be the lead artist, and that's what I always saw. But I think company growing at such a rate, and the need to have artwork so quickly that it just grew past me. By which time I transferred into the miniatures studio. I spent the last 10 years of my, well, when I was 65 to 65, 10 years doing concepts, and there must be hundreds of folders in there. I don't know where they got them. I wouldn't be allowed in to look at them.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that must be quite.
Sorry.
Well, I was going to say that there's must be something interesting in that almost that aspect of ownership, because obviously you create these ideas, and you creating countless different ideas, concepts, and pieces. They obviously belong to Games Workshop in a legal sense.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then they go into the hands of other creators who then create those miniatures that we talked about, and then they're out in the hands of players who do their own things with them. I mean, what's your what do you feel like your level of ownership, or like your relationship with some of these pieces that have gone out into the world?
The level of ownership is Games Workshop.
Right.
It's Games Workshop, the hobby, which is my hobby.
Right.
And I always drew for myself. And that was me, the internal me. And hence you get the Voodoo Forest books.
Yeah.
That's me. It's a lot more pastoral. It's still a bit weird at the edges if you look carefully into them. And so there's always the two things going on. And I'm very good at mentally separating the two.
Mm.
You know, what's mine's mine, and what's yours is this, because you pay my wages.
Sure. Yeah.
And as I say, I love miniatures. So it was a win-win, both sides of that argument. I just won all the time.
Sure.
I get nice pictures on one hand and nice miniatures on the other. Whoa!
Yeah.
What a way to earn a crust! Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and obviously we win as well because we get to see all of that amazing work and make it, see how it does come into the real world through the miniatures that are made. Actually, that does prompt as well the thought around, the movement of the Blan-chi-tsu and the sort of, creating the miniatures even more in the style of your art. I mean, I wonder if you've got any reflections on that and how that's grown into its own kind of sort of sub-genre now.
Well, I mean, I tell you, I always. I'm surrounded by beautifully painted heavy metal and golden demon miniatures. That stuff's so beautifully executed that there's always an army at the back of my head, and that was done by Andy Chambers, and it was a Skaven army.
Right, yeah.
And it was all brown and greys and tatty and torn, and I always liked that. Then I met a chap from Leeds called Neil Reed, Neil 101, who would paint a whole gang for Necromunda in one evening. And they go, what? How'd you do that? And it's like, this stuff looked great. There's no finesse to it, or blending finesse, but in terms of expressive, they look like real characters on a battlefield. I thought, I want to give that a try. So, yeah, that's... and then Blanche-tsu all started. Nothing to do with me, any of it.
Well, a little bit to do with you, I think it's fair to say. And at least it's in honor of your style and a lot of your work, right?
That's fine. Yeah, I've got...
Yeah.
I wish I could paint like that. Yeah, I see some great stuff on the on Facebook and stuff. Try to keep away from Instagram and all that. So just spend all your day just fiddling about with tech and looking at pictures instead of rather than creating. All I want to do is draw pictures.
Yeah. Yeah. And because you're still doing work, right? I mean, you mentioned the Voodoo Forest. That's obviously that's been followed up. You're working on some of the Trench Crusade stuff and continuing to produce there. The miniatures. What other stuff is on the pad for you? What are you looking to work on next?
Well, I'm doing a range of 54s with some chaps in America. There's a few hobby-based things going on. And I'll say a Rat's Fight 2. And yeah, finding time to draw a few more Trench Crusade. That would be luxury. When I retired, I thought I was retiring,
Right.
I can have a rest. And then they cut one of my legs off. And then I started getting loads of work all of a sudden. Yeah, people throw money at me. So, And a lot of it was without me doing a thing. So people using my name, pay money, give me royalties. I thought that's a wonderful way to earn a living. So after a year of retirement, I've started doing a few projects again. And I wish I could tell you more, but I'm told top secret. No, we're not ready yet. I'm like, okay.
Sure.
I'll just tell everybody what I'm doing, but
well, I must admit, so I'm a big fan of Ratspike. I'm very huge fan of yours and Ian Miller's. So Ratspike 2 sounds like a real dream come true for me.
It's going to disappoint you, because there'll be no Games Workshop art in it whatsoever.
I don't think there has to be Games Workshop. I think that your work and Ian Miller's art is just so good that seeing whatever you curate in that space, I'm sure will be really worthwhile. So I'm looking forward to it nonetheless.
Yeah, so am I.
There was something in Ratspike and your other work that I just purely for my own personal curiosity I did want to ask about, and that is your flying ships. So yes. In many pieces across your Warhammer art and across Voodoo Forest and other stuff, you include these sort of flying ships, these sort of magical or otherwise propelled vessels that are just sort of held in the stars and flying around.
Lighter than wood. That's what I made. I'm sort of stretching my brain back into the late 60s again. I think the first time I saw flying islands and stuff was it preceded Roger Dean, the work of Patrick Woodruff.
Right.
Might have cemented that stuff there. But the idea of, galleons floating around, I love it. Yeah. So it won't be Dread Fleet, it would be Dread Fleet Air.
Yeah, because they're gorgeous, amazing pieces of art, and just it's such an inspiring, for me at least, the concept is so magical. It's a wonderful version of the Warhammer world, I think.
It is. I think, can't remember what the series is called now. Philip Reeves' books is a hero in it called Quint, and is lighter than air wood, making galleys out of that stuff in those books. That's great. But he played Warhammer, so everything's everything's linked.
Yeah, so, fantastic. Well, I massively appreciate all of the work that you've done, John, over your career. I think it's incredible. I think it's offered so much to so many of us. But I also appreciate you taking the time to chat to me today, because this has been wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, wow. It was just awesome to chat with John. Thank you so much, John, for joining me. It was amazing to reflect on your career and hear those reflections. Just absolutely amazing. Thank you. I have included links to John Blanche's Voodoo Forest in the description below. I've also included a link for Trench Crusade so that you can check out the work that John is doing there with Thomas Pirinin on that brand new game that is being developed now. And of course, there are more links to John's other amazing projects so that you can go and check those out and see all of the awesome stuff that he's currently up to. If you would like to support the work that I do here on the channel, consider checking out my Patreon. It's the only way I'm able to keep doing this, and you will get access to exclusive and early content, regular updates, the Discord server, and monthly giveaways for the rest of this year. I'm also enormously grateful to anybody who can like and share this video, and for subscribing to the channel. That's a great help too. I would love to hear from you about your favourite John Blanche piece of art down in the comments below. I know that is an impossible question. There are so many awesome pieces by John Blanche, but right now, as of this very moment, it might change, but what is your favourite bit of John Blanche art? Let me know. I'd love to hear it. And you can listen to my interviews as a podcast. Just search for In Conversation with Jordan Sorcery wherever you get your pods, and you should find it. Thank you once again to John for joining me. Thank you for listening and watching. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.